All right, so let's start off by just looking at these visuals to begin the video. So Robert Reich thinks that socialism is all fine and wonderful. Look how amazing socialism looks at the top. Meanwhile, capitalism right below, it looks like a total nightmare. Looks like hell on earth. So this is what Robert Reich thinks of the two different political systems. Socialism's wonderful, capitalism is horrible. And I say this because Robert Reich, judging by his content, usually presents himself as somewhat of a moderate progressive, someone that likes capitalism, elements of free markets, but thinks that we need government controls and regulations, and we need a welfare state to take care of the poorest of the poor and to make sure everyone's taken care of and to keep those greedy corporations in line and make sure that no one's running amok. But then you look at this visual, he clearly thinks socialism is preferable to capitalism.
We renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
All right, so it's worthy of note that this was at the State of the Union this year, and the right wing in America, all the conservatives were tripping over themselves to applaud Donald Trump for saying how horrible socialism is and say America will never be a socialist country.
Woo! You go, President Trump. You make America great again.
Then like 2 days later, President Idiot gets on Twitter and talks about how great he thinks Kim Jong-un is and how Kim Jong-un is going to turn North Korea around and how economic growth and prosperity is just around the corner in North Korea, which is one of the most, if not the most socialist country in the world. Again, to all the magatards out there, this is your king?
Is this your king?
This is the guy that's supposed to make America great again, says socialism is horrible and America will never be socialist. Yet the most socialist country in the world, economic prosperity is just around the corner. I think this brutal dictator is going to do a great job on centrally planning the economy in North Korea. Get the fuck out of here.
Someone should alert Trump that America is now a hotbed of socialism, but it's socialism for the rich. Everyone else is treated to harsh capitalism.
Harsh capitalism. Again, so Robert Reich just thinks that capitalism is so harsh and horrible. And he's also saying, yeah, we have capitalism for the rich, or we have socialism for the rich, yet harsh capitalism for the poor. There's no socialism at all for the poor in America, not according to Robert Reich. Now, let's begin with the fact that, let's look at the tax rates. The top 1% in America, the top 1% of income earners in America pay roughly 38% of America's total income taxes. The top 10% pays roughly 70% of America's total income taxes, depending on which year and study you look at. Meanwhile, the bottom 50% of income earners in America pay roughly 2 to 3% of America's total income taxes. Meaning that at the very least, the top 1% pays 12 times as much in taxes, in income taxes, as the bottom 50% of Americans. This is what socialism for the rich looks like. Not to mention the fact, all these socialist programs, all these welfare programs that are meant to help out the poor, help out the less fortunate. What do we have? We have Social Security, we have Medicare, Medicaid. Social Security benefits often go to the disabled, the people that are unable to work. Medicare and Medicaid, a lot of that goes to help out people who can't afford health care or health insurance. You have Obamacare subsidies. You have public education. Public education is a welfare program because, after all, if we didn't have public education, then the poorest of the poor would not be able to afford to send their kids to school, and it would just create this never-ending cycle of poverty because they would never be getting an education. The Department of Education is spending more money than ever. On average, Americans spend $10,000 per student per year on public education. You also have, I think, SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's a food stamp program. America spends like $60 billion, tens of billions of dollars per year on SNAP, another $4 to $6 billion per year on WIC, Women, Infants, and Children, which is another food stamp program. You have all these welfare programs that are meant to help out the poor, and I'm probably leaving out a lot here. And this is a point I've talked about before. You have all these dishonest lefties like Robert Reich, all these progressives. Whenever people make a fuss about socialism, they say, "Oh, what's wrong with socialism? What, don't you like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and public education and schools and roads? See, we already have all this socialism, so let's have more socialism. Let's have Medicare for all and after school programs, and let's relieve everyone's student loans, and let's pay for let's have tuition free college, and let's have paid maternity leave. Let's have more socialism." But then when shit goes wrong, when a corporation lays off a few thousand workers, when there's an economic crisis, when people can't afford health insurance because the premiums are going up due to regulations and subsidies and distortions, then it's, "Oh, look at all this unfettered capitalism. You guys like this American brand of capitalism? This is capitalism run amok. People can't afford health insurance anymore, and we have economic crises and all this other crap. Corporations are laying off workers. This is what unfettered capitalism looks like." What a fucking liar.
In the conservative mind, socialism means getting something for doing nothing.
Actually, no, this is a straw man. Despite all of the nonsense with conservatives and despite how wrong they are on a lot of issues, this is an issue that I've noticed that conservatives are getting good at. They are recognizing the fact that socialism is predicated on theft. Socialism requires taking money from some people and giving it to other people. Now, whether or not that money goes to the rich or goes to the poor, whether or not it goes to a Wall Street bailout or an auto bailout, or if it goes to pay to help some single mom feed her kids, I don't give a shit. It's like when someone stole my bike when I was in 6th grade. Someone stole my brand new bike that I got for my birthday a few months after I got it. And I don't know what whoever stole my bike, I don't know what they used the bike for. They might have desperately needed a means of transportation to get to and from work or to and from school. They might have gifted that bike to one of their kids, and they couldn't afford to give their kids a nice Christmas gift, so they gave their kid my bike. They might have sold the bike to feed their family. You know what? I don't give a shit what they did with my bike. All I care is that they stole my fucking bike.
Getting something for doing nothing. This pretty much describes General Motors' receipt of $600 million in federal contracts, plus $500 million in tax breaks since...
You see this, and this is a point that Robert Reich is going to make again. He's conflating tax breaks and tax cuts with welfare. So by Robert Reich logic, if you get a tax cut, if the government takes less of your money, that's the same as welfare. That's the same as getting a check from the taxpayers, according to Robert Reich. This is how the left views wealth and money. They don't see your money as your money. They see all money and all wealth in society as society's money, and government has a responsibility to distribute it and decide how much of it you get to keep and earn. What a fascist.
Since Trump took office. Some of this corporate welfare has gone into the pockets of GM executives. Chairman and CEO Mary Barra raked in almost $22 million.
So he's talking about corporate welfare. And yeah, there's a lot of corporate welfare, but notice how he's making it exclusively about Trump and those evil Republicans, which they are well deserving of criticism and mockery. I just mocked Donald Trump. But he's not going to mention the fact that Barack Obama, Democrat superhero Barack Obama, was the one that bailed out GM and Chrysler. He's not going to mention the fact he's about to mention the Wall Street bailouts. Not going to mention the fact that it was a bipartisan bill, and if I recall correctly, Democrats voted for TARP and the Wall Street bailouts more than congressional Republicans did. Not to mention Solyndra, and in California, in the blue progressive state of California, they're constantly subsidizing corporations that are involved in green technology like electric cars and solar panels, products that mainly go to the rich so that the rich can pay less for electricity and less for energy. But meanwhile, they impose taxes on oil to fight climate change. So a lot of this corporate welfare is it's usually Democrats that are giving welfare to the rich and to the corporations, but Robert Reich acts like it's only Republicans that are responsible for it.
In total compensation in 2017 alone. But GM employees are subject to harsh capitalism. GM is planning to lay off more than 14,000 workers and close 3 assembly plants and 2 component factories in North America by the end of 2019.
Yeah, those GM bailouts that Obama, that bailout is working out just fine. Although I think, in all fairness to Robert Reich, I looked this up before I decided to record this. Apparently, he did criticize the auto bailouts when they were happening. So good for him.
End of 2019.
Good boy, Robert.
The nation's largest banks saved $21 billion last year thanks to Trump's tax cuts.
Again, tax cuts are the same as welfare, according to Robert Reich. You remember when the founding fathers they had the tax protests and the Boston Tea Party? What they really wanted was more welfare.
Some of which went into massive bonuses for bank
executives. The tea tax, if they would have gotten the tea tax cut, that would have been the same as welfare.
Bonuses for bank executives. On the other hand, thousands of lower-level bank employees got a big dose of harsh capitalism. They lost their jobs.
Harsh capitalism.
Banks that are too big to fail, courtesy of the 2008 bank bailout, enjoy a hidden subsidy of some $83 billion a year because they have the backing of the...
Yeah, the bipartisan Wall Street bailout. Also worth mentioning, since we're on the subject of finance and banking, the financial industry in America is one of the most, if not the most regulated industry in the United States. You have like 6 federal regulatory agencies. The main one, the Federal Reserve, which was established by progressive superhero Woodrow Wilson, which is involved in distorting the entire economy. And then under the New Deal, we got Glass-Steagall during FDR. It was FDR that signed Glass-Steagall. You had the FDIC, which guarantees depositors' deposits in banks, which only encourages more risky behavior on Wall Street and from banks. Because what incentive does a bank have to not go bankrupt when the federal government is just going to bail them out with FDIC, is just going to bail their depositors out, which again is presented as this form of protection for the poor and the middle class who have money in the bank. Hey, if your bank goes bankrupt, we'll bail you out. But again, the all these regulations and subsidies they were laws established by progressive superheroes like FDR and Woodrow Wilson. But according to Robert Reich, it's all those greedy, evil Republicans.
The federal government. This hidden subsidy gives Wall Street's giant banks a huge advantage. In 2017, Wall Street's bonus pool was $31.4 billion. So take away the hidden subsidy, and that bonus pool disappears, along with most profits. Trump and his appointees at the Federal Reserve are easing bank requirements put in place after the bailout, but they will make sure the biggest banks remain too big.
This is another thing they do is, finance is one of the most regulated industries in the country. Yet whenever Congress or the president, whenever they repeal like 1 or 2 minor laws, then they act like we have unfettered capitalism. Even though we still have a Federal Reserve and an SEC and FDIC and a bunch of other regulatory agencies and regulations. What is it? Yeah, Glass-Steagall. What was the other one? Dodd-Frank. and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But again, apparently there's unfettered capitalism in finance in America.
Too big to fail. When he was in business, Trump perfected the art of using bankruptcy to shield himself from the consequences of bad decisions.
He sure did. You know what else he used? Donald Trump used antitrust legislation as a club to beat his competition over the head with. And I believe, if I recall correctly, in another video that Robert Reich did on those big, scary monopolies, Robert Reich talks about how much he loves antitrust legislation to keep those big, greedy corporations in line, but yet he never wants to mention the fact that it's been used as a club by corporations to beat their competition over the head with. Good job, Robert. This is all your fault. This is all progressives' fault.
Decisions. Socialism for the rich at its worst, while leaving employees twisting in the wind. Now,
it's also worthy of note, I forgot to mention with the tax cuts, that, yeah, it's always good to reduce taxes, but you also got to reduce spending, which is something that the Republicans did not and simply refused to do, meaning we're still spending at a deficit. I think the deficit's reaching $1 trillion this year, if I recall correctly. Eventually, Americans are going to have to pay that back, which means it's going to require tax hikes in the future or printing more money in the future. And as we all know, inflation is just a hidden form of taxation.
Now, all over America, executives who run their companies into the ground are getting...
Again, these are legitimate points that Robert Reich could bring up, but even he's too dumb to bring them up. He'd rather lie.
Getting gold-plated exit packages while their workers get pink slips. Under socialism for the rich, you can screw up big time and still reap big rewards. Equifax's Richard Smith retired in 2017 with an $18 million pension in the wake of a security breach that exposed the personal information of 145 million customers to hackers. Wells Fargo's Carrie Tolstead departed with a $125 million exit package after being in charge of the unit that opened more than 2 million unauthorized customer accounts.
I don't know the context behind these exit packages, these golden parachutes, but we often hear horror stories about how these CEOs that ruin companies, these bad CEOs, how unfair it is that they get golden parachutes and a lot of money just to leave. But as Don Watkins and Yaron Brook mentioned in Equals Unfair, the reason why they get a lot of these golden parachutes is because they have ironclad contracts or they have deals, and it is good for the company, especially when there's a scandal like with Wells Fargo, or if the CEO is just incompetent. Sometimes it's worth the millions of dollars to get rid of that CEO to change direction of the company, to stop the bleeding, so to speak. So yeah, we often hear about these horror stories in the news, but a lot of times it's really good for the company to cut their losses and move forward and change direction, especially if they're trying to save face for the shareholders and the public.
Customer accounts. Whatever happened to the idea of a meritocracy, an economic system that allows everyone to get ahead through hard work, and economic gains go only to those who deserve them?
Well, you just want to give everyone free money, so clearly you don't believe in meritocracy.
Around 60% of America's wealth is now inherited. Many of today's super rich have never done a day's work in their lives.
Wow. So you see what he's doing here. Robert Reich is using the concept of meritocracy to beat heirs, people who inherit money, over the head with, saying, hey, these people who inherit money, they're not working for their money. This isn't meritocracy. Meanwhile, people who do inherit lots of money and continue to bust their ass and work hard and grow their wealth, like the Walton family and the super Koch brothers, Robert Reich shits on those people all the time. Charles Koch is in his 80s and he still works 7 days a week. Charles Koch still gets up at work at 7 in the morning every day. He's in his 80s. He could have retired long ago. In fact, he could have chosen to just never work a day in his life and just kick back and relax and enjoy the millions of dollars that he inherited. But no, if he works hard, then Robert Reich still shits on him because he's a greedy capitalist. He still shits on the Waltons because they're hoarding all their wealth. So which is it, Robert? By the way, Charles Koch probably works harder and more hours than most socialist millennials. But even so, but he's talking about meritocracy. So what is Robert suggesting here? So if you bust your ass and you work hard and you amass millions, maybe even billions of dollars worth of wealth over your lifetime, over 60, 70 years, what is Robert Reich suggesting that you should not be able to give that money to your kids and your family? You should not be able to give that money to your loved ones? What good is amassing wealth and busting your ass and making money if you don't have the right to decide what to do with it?
Work in their lives. Trump's response has been to expand this divide by cutting the estate tax to apply only to estates valued at over $22 million per couple. Mitch McConnell is now proposing that the estate tax be repealed altogether. To the conservative mind, the specter of socialism conjures up a society in which no one is held accountable, and no one...
Yeah, and they're right. Socialism is ultimately an evasion of reality, and by extension, it is anti-justice and anti-freedom. People who work hard and work smart don't get to keep the benefits and the rewards of their labor and their genius, and people who don't do anything are rewarded no matter what. That's what socialism is predicated upon.
And no one has to work for what they receive. Yet that's exactly the society Trump and the Republicans are promoting for the rich. Meanwhile, most Americans are subject to an increasingly harsh and arbitrary capitalism.
Harsh and arbitrary capitalism, despite all of the welfare programs and programs that are designed to help the less fortunate that I've mentioned, tens if not hundreds of billions of dollars spent each year. But according to Robert Reich, those programs are non-existent.
They need stronger safety nets, and they deserve a bigger piece of the economic pie.
There's no such thing as the economic pie. Get out of here with your zero-sum nonsense.
If you want to call this socialism, fine. I call it fair.
Well, there you go. Robert Reich thinks that socialism is fair. What more do you need to know about Robert Reich?